welcome to another episode of the Who Dat Jedi podcast. We are the Who Dat Jedi Council. I'm Aaron, and with me as always is Dave and Fredo. How you doing, guys?
Good.
Hello.
And I have to apologize if, well, right now the dog is asleep. My wife is coming back from parent-teacher conferences, but the dogs might start going nuts at some point. So you might hear barking or chewing on bones or something like that. And if it's not my dogs, it's probably Dave's kids because they're running around somewhere, right? So
It also might be the ghost at Fredo's.
that's true. It could be the ghost at Fredo's. If we hear the ghost speaking Spanish again, it's either Fredo. It won't be one of my dogs. So.
I don't know. Do you know if your dog speaks Spanish?
No. You're gonna house sit for me in about a month or so you can teach him.
I will. I'll start teaching Luna some Spanish verbs.
So last week we were trying to record, or trying to do a watch party of Revenge of the Sith, and then a tornado came into town. So that episode got scrapped. So we're gonna try it again. Tornado is not supposed to come till tomorrow, so we should be good. Knock on wood. I'm not gonna knock on wood because it'll make my dogs bark. But so if you want to queue up Disney Plus or DVD or whatever to a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away in Revenge of the Sith. We are going to just do our own little Who Dat Jedi commentary track. So on the count of three, everybody hit play. And 1, 2, 3, play. And here we go. And I did want to say this again. I'm not trying to rehash everything I said. I remember saying this last week that in this crawl, I remember when I first went to the theater, I was like, how are we supposed to know who General Grievous is? You know, it's like I felt like I was, dropped in the middle of an unknown country, and I got kind of a little get off my lawn-ish. But then I realized, recently that it's no different than episode 4 in that crawl. Who's Princess Leia? What's a Death Star? It's like, so, it's just interesting how we start, our expectations get to a certain point. So,
Well, and what's interesting is that arguably this is the one where we know the most. I mean, we know who Count Dooku is. We know what Sith Lords are. We know what the Clone Wars are supposed to be. So there's an expectation that you've watched at least episode 2, if not episodes 1 and 2, to get to this point.
Well, that's actually the first time that you really needed to have done the summer reading to understand some of the things that are going on. We'll hit on those as we go, but
I do remember when this movie came out, a lot of people had favorable opinions about this movie, and I know that Aaron feels differently, but there was a lot of talk.
Now let's put that out there. I don't dislike it. It's not my favorite. So
there was a lot of talk from people at the time that you could watch this movie and the original trilogy and be good. Because this movie, not only because of the quality or presumed quality, but because of how much story gets covered here. Yeah. Like in this movie, you get everything that you kind of wanted from the prequels to begin with.
And let's pause real quick. This is the best opening shot of any of the movies.
I agree.
With all due respect. Sorry, this is just the depth, the scope of it is just awesome.
I love the sound here too. We're not listening to this as we're talking over everything, but the sound design here is incredible. John Williams' score, it all works so beautifully. And to your point about this opening maybe being the best in any of the movies, I would agree, and it really harkens back to episode 4, which was how we all got introduced to Star Wars, was this huge, crazy scale that was just like put you in your place a little bit. You're like, oh my gosh, this thing is gigantic, and I'm ready to be awed.
One of the things that I do like about this, that even in just this little opening, speaking about the sound, they found ways to make the blaster sounds differently, the explosions sound differently, the droids make different noises. So they find a way to give everything a little bit of identity and uniqueness. even though yours not it's supposed to be overwhelming.
So I do have to say that, and this has to do with all of the prequels. The droid fighters bother me. The little transformer vulture things, and then coming up later, the buzz droids. But I mean, here, I mean, just these shots where you see the pilots flying through space. I mean, that's kind of oogie. You know, in episode 4, when the TIE fighters blew up, you didn't see the body flowing through space. I mean, didn't this almost got it got a PG-13, didn't it?
It was the first Star Wars film to get a PG-13. Yeah. It was the most grown-up Star Wars movie at release. And yeah, I mean, like, to your point, a lot of this, some of it works, some of it doesn't work as well. The Buzz Droid stuff, I think a lot of people would have preferred more dogfighting. And I know that George was just trying to give us something different, but I mean, the Buzz Droids are fine. A lot of this stuff it works for the narrative because you're trying to establish
Try spinning.
Obi-Wan.
That's a good trick. Sorry.
Well, they recycled that. They have to. But you see a little bit more of a banter between the two mains, between Anakin and Obi-Wan. And I think like that was something that a lot of people had hoped to see. And in episode, it's a far cry from episode 2. And I think like you can kind of explain that by just saying Anakin was stupid young. I mean, like if you're talking about a teenagers are terrible to deal with. We all know this.
He was young and horny. I mean,
yeah. And so he's grown up a little bit, and so suddenly they're getting along much better. You know, it's funny how that works.
This is one of the things that Clone Wars did a good job of showing us is that it's been 3 years since episode 2, so that the amount of growing up that Anakin has done has been tremendous in both himself personally, but also the relationship between him and Obi-Wan. He's no longer a Padawan, he's a knight. He's somebody who can stand on an equal level, with Obi-Wan, so that it's a different dynamic now between them. It's a more adult one. So,
and I'm also just this is a minor thing, but the disco headband headsets just are kind of goofy design choices as well. But I get it.
They go with the aesthetic that episode 4 will bring.
They actually kind of do, that was one thing, because I remember one of the biggest critiques of the prequels, and especially episode 1, was all the sleek designs and how big of a difference it was from the more mechanical, rough, worn, lived-in look that episode 4 had. And so like here you do see steps in that direction finally.
However, I will say one thing I will not get over is in episode 2 and episode 3, there's no room in those starfighters for the astromech droid. And you cannot retcon anything to tell me how R2 is fitting in the wing or R4 is fitting in the wing. That has driven me bonkers forever. There's no room for him.
This is a nice redemptive moment for Obi-Wan when he springs out of the cockpit and immediately goes into action, because like prior to that point, I had a bit of a, oh gosh, are they going to make him into the bumbling sidekick in this movie? Because Anakin, they really wanted to present Anakin as competent. And in doing that, I was worried they might nerf Obi-Wan a little bit, and like some of the earlier scenes in this movie present that as a possibility. But
it comes back here in about 30 seconds too, in about 30 seconds to a minute. I mean, it becomes a Scooby-Doo episode here in a minute, and that's I mean.
But I did like that moment, like. He jumps straight out and immediately starts cutting droids down, and it's like, oh, okay, he's not just, bumbling sidekick guy.
But it's also important in terms of the final act, because if we're going to believe that they can go toe-to-toe, we got to see that he's also a man of action. He can't just simply be the negotiator, as the incoming General Grievous declares him.
So the speaking of Grievous, the homework that you need to have done, because I remember sitting in the theater, I'm like, why is this droid coughing? Because I hadn't seen the Clone Wars movie. I didn't. I just knew this was General Grievous was the new baddie, and he was a droid general, and he was obviously a droid. And you don't find out until later that he has organs in his stomach. I don't know, but the whole time that he's coughing, you have to do the homework to find out that Mace Windu like crushed his larynx. I don't know, what did he do. He thought like
Isn't he force choked his internal organs, or force crush his internal organs in the Clone Wars micro series?
see Ellie doesn't like it either. Ellie doesn't like it either. But
Yeah, it was the Clone Wars micro series that revealed that little detail, and again, you were rewarded if you watched that because, like you said, everybody's like, "This coughing robot, what in the hey?" What, what? I don't agree with this design choice or this story element. But if you'd seen that, you kind of understood. So, we always talk about the summer reading on here, and this was one of the most glaring examples of it.
here's another thing, and it gets into the space battle previous, and now this elevator thing. Because this is real world. Everybody has these fears when you're in an elevator. What's going to happen if it just starts, crash into the ground, right? This isn't fantasy space stuff. This is everybody feels this when they get on an elevator. That Tower of Terror type thing, or in the Jedi fighters when his windshield is covered up in grease and he can't see. We've all been that way in a car. I just find it really interesting that here in the space fantasy movies, they're finding ways for the audience to connect with what they're going through. If it was anything else that was just made up, then I don't know, the sense of urgency wouldn't be as strong. So
George has always had a real eye for that.
And
I mean,
also,
he's this visual storyteller, right? And so he gives you these visual, pieces of information that tell the story for you. And I love that about his work. And this is part of the reason I'm sitting here talking about this movie with you guys right now. Is because, like, yes, that makes sense. Like, I can follow that. People sometimes complain about the politics and and the acting and other things, but it's like, well, when you're looking at the visual language on display here,
well,
it's
and the
often...
visual language. I love how in again episode 2 and in episode 3, any chair that Palpatine is sitting in looks like the Emperor's throne from Return of the Jedi. I mean, that's a good style wink. And my wife just got home, so the dogs are going to...
yeah, this is like the inverse. Yeah, this is like the inverse of the throne room in Jedi, because instead of
Mhm.
steps leading up to his chair, you got stairs leading down. You got all that space in between, and it's really well designed to evoke that look from Episode 6 without necessarily being a straightforward copy.
And I really, really like the idea behind this whole sequence. The visual cues here. Anakin's wearing black. Like we saw that with Luke, where he went from wearing white to gray to black. We've seen a similar thing going on with Anakin, where he was wearing like a tan to a brown to now black. And again, the visual storytelling, we're understanding what's going on around us just by watching. Like, we don't necessarily need the dialogue to tell us what's happening.
Also, and another thing that I really do appreciate is, and it's not going to come through till in a couple of minutes. It's even now, even though we're in the middle of a duel between Dooku and Obi-Wan and Anakin, that this is all part of the master plan of Sidious's master plan. Like the battle, this duel, everything that's going to happen he's been laying all the groundwork, and he's going to wait for everybody to just walk into his traps. And this is just one of the many that we're going to see throughout this movie.
By the way, the last, what, 4 episodes of the Clone Wars season 7, I love how those work in tandem with this movie. And so I think to appreciate those episodes, you need to watch this movie again.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
They really work off of each other very well.
I mean, if you go online, go to YouTube, you'll see a lot of fan edits where they splice and include elements from this movie and those last few episodes of season 7 of Clone Wars, where they try to make it all fit so you can tell, and even not just episodes season 7, but also they'll include Jedi Fallen Order, they'll include the Bad Batch. They do a good job of making it all fit into, okay, this is what we know will happen in this movie, but that it's all coordinated, it's all planned.
So here's where I wish that this would have been a series of Anakin making the wrong choices and giving into the dark side, and not thinking that he's going a noble route, doing things to save his wife later on. I mean, that's my big critique. I've mentioned a bunch of times how, it's he turns into Darth Vader to save his wife's life, and that's just kind of like, ugh, I wish like this one.
Like tripped himself into the dark side.
Yeah, it starts with slicing off Dooku's head. Then I don't know, make him give Yoda a wedgie or something. I don't know, you know what I mean? It's like have him have him just make constant bad decisions, or telling Mace Windu where to go or something like that. Just and it even with when he doesn't get on the Jedi Council. I'm sorry, not to give it the cart before the horse, but yeah. So
again, this is where the summer reading helps. We shouldn't have to rely on the other material to make all of this work.
Clone Wars makes it better. I've said it.
When you watch Clone Wars, you see him just making poor choice after poor choice, and
selfish choice after
exactly
going for power
and for good reason. And it's not sometimes those poor choices or selfish choices. They're not for evil. They're not for his own gain. It's I'm trying to protect my friend, or I'm trying to save my Padawan, or I'm trying to do this good. And he takes the quick path, which is the one that leads him to the dark side.
So he just flashed back to Grievous, and I know again that character either works or doesn't work for you, but I think the character is really important because of what we were just talking about with Palpatine's plan to replace his Padawan, or his Sith apprentice, I should say. You cannot kill Dooku in the first 10 minutes of this movie and then not have any kind of antagonist after that point, I don't think. There has to be some kind of a red herring for the good guys to be chasing after at this point.
100%.
Yeah. So obviously, like, his character is super important from that perspective. And I also really enjoy the whole concept of the lightsaber collection and the Jedi killer and everything else. It's a fun idea.
I used to have this idea for if they ever made a Star Wars fighting video game where you could design your own Jedi, you could design or character, design your own lightsaber, and you know how in racing games you play in a race for pink slips. You could have a duel where you could put your lightsaber up against the other person's lightsaber, and whoever wins walks away with both, which could have been interesting, but the other thing I was going to say regarding Dooku, about Grievous, is he's a continuation of the story that we've seen where metal or machine and organic are merging. Because you saw what's his name, Maul in Clone Wars, where he's half man, half machine. You've seen Anakin with his metallic hand. but it's all hinting at where it's going to lead to Anakin becoming Vader, where he's so mixed between man and machine that one can't live without the other.
Well, and again, the summer reading again because he calls Obi-Wan the negotiator, and it's like I was sitting there at theater. Oh, okay, that's interesting, out of left field. But if you watch the Clone
Yeah.
Wars, you understand. Um,
They're trying to
so
make
why
it
do you
seem like
think?
there's been more story happening that we haven't seen. That's it. And it's a good trick to kind of hint at the 3 years that we, at this point, had not seen in 2005. But yeah, it does kind of go like, well, it'd be nice to have seen it. Of course, we waited a whole few years to get it later.
So did the Last Jedi help to explain something here? Because it's always sat wrong with me that here Obi-Wan is spending a lot of up close and personal time with Palpatine in the beginning of this movie, right after Palpatine, basically coerced Anakin into murder, and he doesn't get a sense of the dark side, doesn't get a sense of evil within Palpatine. So did the Last Jedi, when Rey says to Luke, "You shut yourself off from the Force," is that what Palpatine's doing so that the Jedi can't get hip to him? Do you think he's shutting himself off until he needs to use the Force? Did the
It's
Last
an
Jedi?
Good
it's an
question because
yeah. Go ahead, Fredo. Sorry.
just because I mean, yeah, I was going to say, yeah, because we've seen in episode two where he's been in the same room as Windu and Yoda, so and the rest of the council. So he's comfortable enough doing whatever he's doing in order to ensure that they do not detect him. And it never crosses their mind until this movie when Anakin finally reveals him to them. But so whatever he's doing, whether he's shutting himself off from the Force or whether he's engaging in some sort of other Sith magic to hide himself, yeah, we don't know.
I think it's a fun theory, and again, like based on what we know from the series of movies at this point, it tracks. So, um, I think that's cool.
Battle
Um,
droids are useless, by the way.
Even more so, we were talking about some of the changes that occurred in the early part of this movie. Like they lightened up their voices, like they made them sound squeakier and like more feeble, and like I just like to the point where I was like thrown off a little bit in the theater on my first viewing. But again, I think the point is, yeah, these guys are just totally useless. Like they're pawns in this whole thing. Like they are not a factor at all.
Well, it's similar to the, I mean, a few minutes earlier, we saw R2 take out some two super destroyers
Yeah.
and did so without too much fuss. And I'm like, okay, that's when you know you're like, okay, what's going on here? Because those guys got these wimpy voices and they're trying to sound menacing, and R2 just coats them in oil, sets them on fire, and whistles away.
Now, so I'm going to ask you: do you think because you likened it to Episode 4? Episode
Mhm.
4, you have the opening battle, and then it cools off really pretty quick. They shift into neutral quick. This movie has not shifted out of neutral or shifted into neutral yet. I mean,
No.
we're how many minutes into this now? We're 22 and a half minutes into this, and it's been, you know, the needle's been buried. There's been no really any letdown. Do you think that is okay? Do you think it should have? Do you think it's gone on a little bit too long, the hijinks and everything, or?
Well, George ultimately painted himself into this kind of corner with what he did in the previous two movies, and it became by necessity he had to just fill this movie with every last scene that people would want to see. Um, the duels, the resolution, the turning to the dark side, the Vader reveal. Um, and again, he chose to open with an action sequence. Um, and he had to get through some exposition with that too. Like we talked about Dooku having to get knocked out of the picture. So I think like by I'm not sure that the movie suffers necessarily. I just feel like it had to be this way. Like the choices that he had made before this point made this into a movie that needed to be like just packed to the gills.
I will say though, and also, I mean, if you're gonna make a mistake or if you're gonna err on one side, do so on the side of the action sequences and the duels and the excitement, because that's the stuff that that are excited to see. They want to get more of. It's usually the criticisms that people have of this movie are not moments, not like the opening sequence here. It's going to be more the scenes we're going to get later that are all nice and quiet.
By the way, in the crowd that's there to meet them when they land, I believe Mon Mothma is in that group, and because I know Bail Organa is as well. There is a whole sequence of scenes that are or the whole like precursor to the rebellion or the birthing of the rebellion, if you will, is left out. It's left on the cutting room floor, and I think that would have, kind of to your point, Fredo, that would have been more interesting than Padme combing her hair. Um, as far as the overall Star Wars story, but it is what it is.
And it really gives her something to do because she's a key player in the formation of the alliance, the rebellion.
Yeah, I mean, you see it in the second film that she used in opposition to the Chancellor gaining more and more power, even though he's from her system, which is kind of an interesting place for her to be in. And obviously, we saw the amount of strength that she had to possess in the first movie as a ruler of a planet with all of her people's lives at stake. Um, she goes from that to combing her hair. And like that critique I totally get. Um, that wasn't necessarily something that bothered me a lot when I first watched these movies, but I think the older I get, the more that it does bother me. Um, but I also
Oh,
know I loved when we had Leslie on a couple weeks back though, and she talked about how like, well, we all know women who have let themselves get trampled over by some man, some toxic man,
Yeah.
and that's what he is, and that's what happens.
I will also say for the plot regarding the rebellion that gets excised from this movie, in some ways it allowed for the creation of stuff like Rebels and Rogue One, where you see the ascendancy of the rebellion against the Empire, that it doesn't start all in one spot and that it's slowly systems to systems and then they come together so that it feels more organic. It feels like it's those heroes who kind of decide to unite, not just a legacy from episode three that got left to the side.
I liked the visual touch of Padme and the buns
Yeah.
with the hair buns. That was nice.
By the way, this conversation's where we find out that she's pregnant, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
They
he
hug.
says
This
it's
moment of his life.
yes, except he doesn't really mean it. He sort of means it. I don't know. There's a weird acting moment there where he's like, this is no, this is the happiest moment of my life. And it's like, are you really that happy? No, you're freaked out, I think. Which is normal,
Which, which
but
I was just gonna say, as the only guy here who's gotten that set of news three different times, is it normal to just be yeah happy, or is like happy with oh my god?
it's yeah, it's a mix. It's always a mix, right?
So Grievous is on Utapau.
Oh,
Still,
I love
still
the
coughing.
music beat here.
And I love the design of this planet. This movie's creative as heck with some of the planets that they show us. Some people might think they go a little overboard, but it's like, okay, so you got this sinkhole planet and then you get to see Felucia. Um, you get to see
Kishik,
Maigito. Obviously Mustafar eventually
Kishik,
pays
yeah,
off.
the Wookiee planet.
Yeah, Kashyyyk. Um, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really cool planet hopping in this movie, which I really appreciate too.
Yeah, and Palpatine here, Sidious, is talking about how he's on his way to getting a new apprentice.
Mm-hmm.
And now I think we're going to have the most controversial scene in all the for the net nerds.
I'll let you go ham on this, Aaron, because I know this is one of your favorite scenes.
Oh, okay. I was, yeah. Okay, ugh. No, this is not the one I was talking about. But there's Padme combing her hair. Ugh.
For whatever it's worth,
Let me
it
ask you
didn't
this.
bother
No,
me.
let me ask you this. Do you think
Yeah.
do you think the Ukrainian president right now is combing his hair, saying to his wife, "Oh, let's just run away from all this and let's just go back to where we met in France?" And it's like you want your leaders to be like, you know what, Anakin, you're just gonna have to chill because this is what I'm doing right now. You know, but it was such a letdown. Such a letdown.
At the risk of going on a full defense of the white person here, because this is a common defense of white males, he is still pretty young here. So if he's getting a little distracted, I sort of get it. But
Okay,
anyway, I
here's
think Fredo, you were going to say something.
No, I guess the only thing I was going to say, and this is the difficulty. This is because we're supposed to have spent two movies up to this point with these characters. We're supposed to know that they love one another. And there's a difference between expressing teenage, romantic, first love, which is what we saw in episode two, to
Mm-hmm.
now expressing the more adult family, partners for life love that they're supposed to be having. And I think that's a much harder, more difficult one to express because that one's not based necessarily on super highs of expressions of love. It's based on a continuum, so to speak, or on a regular presence. I don't know. So, anyways, I know that that's much harder to show.
I think it's intentional though that they are not at that place where they should be because you hear her later on where she says, "Don't shut me out, talk to me." Right? It's clear to me that like he's not getting it. He doesn't understand what it means to be a good partner.
still all of these scenes that we're seeing between combing her hair and saying she's pregnant and him waking up shirtless, sweating in bed. All of this could have been, again, those bad decisions, that lead him down the dark side. The story, it just gets hard to buy that he becomes Darth Vader. I know I keep beating that dead horse.
The problem really, the problem there really is, it's that you need to see a through line of connection. George writes one in here. It's written in here. The problem is it's not connecting emotionally
Well,
because you have to buy that he's willing to do whatever it takes to save her in order to buy that he would sell his soul.
so I would okay. So I had an English teacher in high school who thought that revealing Darth Vader to be a pasty old white dude um, at the end of Jedi was just totally ruined that character. Said here you had the biggest bad guy on the planet, and he turns out to be Grandpa Simpson. I disagreed with him. Um, I still do a little bit. However, I will say I understand where he's coming from because I think that Revenge of the Sith ruined, maybe ruined is too harsh of a word, but really tainted the character of Darth Vader from episode 4 and episode 5. Because if it was, again, if it was, telling Mace Windu where to go and knocking over, Yoda's floaty chair, or, flipping off Obi-Wan, then I see Darth Vader that we get like in Rogue One and such. But it's just tough to reconcile those characters.
but it's not that part of George Lucas's point that we can see
It doesn't
his
have to.
anger
It
at
doesn't
the.
have to be a good point. I'm saying I think he made a poor decision. I mean, far be it from me to disagree with the maker, but it just um, but it makes me wonder how many people were in the room with George Lucas saying, "Really?"
Oh no, no, and I agree, and I see, but I also think it's part of the dynamic. He's trying to save or damn Anakin's character with love. He's saying love is the ultimate cause of his destruction. And that's harder to connect than, say, pride or resentment or feelings of inadequacy because he's not treated on the same level as the council should be treating him. Those are easy for us to understand because, again, those are emotions that we'll feel at work or at school or whatever. But the idea that he's felt by love is much harder.
Now I will say I how okay. Well, I think actually um, the way Ben Solo becomes Kylo Ren makes a heck of a lot more sense than the way Anakin becomes Darth Vader. But I guess well anyway, um, I'll quit beating that horse. Everybody knows how I feel
Well, yeah,
for the
this
remainder
is
of
the
this. It's
well,
I
it's the crux of why this movie doesn't work for people. Like, if you didn't like this movie, chances are it's because you didn't like the Darth Vader um, characterization, the turn, or the lead to the turn, or
well
who he is
and
here.
you know
And
what? Sometimes your favorite band writes a bad song and puts it on the CD. And just because George Lucas, it came out of the pencil of George Lucas, I don't think makes it, perfect. Doesn't make it good,
Oh no,
even,
oh
and
no, and I don't.
so,
And I don't disagree, but I also do think there's, again, the point is, why is he doing this? Because you're right, he could have gone with all the elements that you're saying. He consciously chose to make it, he's going to fall to the dark side because he's in love with his wife and doesn't want to lose her. It's that possessive love. It's not a good, because part of good love is saying sometimes you have to let people go, and he doesn't want to do that
but you know what?
for
It
all we've
doesn't.
seen of his character.
But here
Uh,
we have Anakin with Palpatine right now, and it doesn't jive with that because Palpatine is corrupting him with power. So
mhm.
those two, it's is it he becomes evil because of love, or is he become evil because he wants power? So
Yes,
I mean, but those
you're
those
right.
those two things don't work together here. You know, eventually Palpatine uses it, as a lever, but ultimately,
And I guess,
they just seem to be at odds here. So
the reason it.
well,
I
and
think
again,
that. Oh, go ahead.
no, no, I was just going to say, and I think, and no, and I agree with you, but I think that the reason for that is because he's trying to find a way to make Anakin's fall be both tragic and something that audiences would connect, because we're going to see him do some pretty horrific things here. So, there has to be some sort of push pull so that people still feel they can be redeemed. So, but yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Well, I think that's probably where I would go with it, which is that I think the push pull is important for anybody who has no familiarity with 4, 5, and 6, or vague familiarity, um, or even a strong familiarity, because, like, again, of the rhyming nature of it. But I think, like, this idea that it could go either way for him, like, we get that sense in Return of the Jedi with Luke, where man, he's force choking guards, and he's like, wearing black, and he's like cutting people down, and I don't know what he's gonna do. And oh my gosh, he's mad at his dad, and he's cut off his hand. um and you get that feeling that it could go the wrong way, right? And I think, like, what he was trying to do here, and the reason that I like the choices that he made, is that he's trying to give you the sense that it's not inevitable, that he's not necessarily going to change into Vader, though he is if you've seen the other movies. But, like, that feeling, he's trying to invoke that feeling in you. It's like, oh no, don't do it. Like,
but see,
don't turn bad.
that's where I think that's where the love story could have been used for Padme to like reel him back as he's, you know, clawing for power, and like right then with the Jedi Council getting all pissy with him, you know, they could have cut to a scene instead of him talking to Obi-Wan here, could have been talking, you know, ranting to Padme, and she's the calm in his storm, you know. That could have been used that way. However, I want to get back to something here. The Jedi Council. Anybody ever wonder how holograms work? Ki-Adi-Mundi's sitting in a chair and looking to his left and looking at Yoda and looking to his right and looking at Obi-Wan. It's like, how are they? What's the camera set? I want to know what the technical design of a hologram projector is. Anyway, I digress.
By the way,
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I wanted to focus on this scene just for a moment because this is the scene after the council when Anakin gets put on by Palpatine's order, but the Jedi Council don't make him a master, and then they give him the assignment in secret to be a spy. And I'm almost like, you know, if you don't trust the kid, as we'll hear later on when Yoda and Obi-Wan leave, you know, if you don't trust him, why the heck are you giving him arguably the toughest, hardest assignment that he could ever have? And you almost go like, this is where that hubris that everybody mentions about the council comes back to bite them. Like, you're putting the two of them together, knowing that he's going to be conflicted about the whole deal, and you're okay with this.
Oh yeah, I mean it's like a massive, giant, flashing neon sign. Like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? And Obi-Wan in the aftermath's like, oh, he did not take to the assignment with enthusiasm. And it's like, yeah, of course not, right? He didn't want to do this thing that you're asking him to do that he feels is wrong, first of all. And like the guy's like, this is an effective bit of storytelling. The guy's carrying around this guilt of having murdered someone in cold blood. And so he's going to want to try to do the right thing right now, right? I need to make the correct choice. I need to do the good things that the Jedi Code tells me to do. And it becomes kind of self-fulfilling in a way that that's going to lead him directly into Palpatine's grasp.
But also, I'm also thinking in terms of they literally just, you know, Mace just literally read him the riot act before telling him to sit down, shut up, and mind his P's and Q's before telling him, but okay, behind the back, go help us out. It's like, dude, if nothing, throw him a bone, give him the title of master, make him feel happy, appease him, make him feel good about this before you give him the bad news.
You know, as the way the story is shown to us, I do feel that his biggest mistake was to not show trust in Anakin after Anakin had come to them and told them the truth. And at that point, you'll stay at the temple. We don't trust you to come with us. And I think like that ultimately was what pushed him over. And I don't know. I mean, like it's kind of fun to get into these sorts of discussions because on the one hand we can say, oh, well, this wasn't effective at all because I didn't buy that he wasn't, you know, like that he turned or that he should have turned the way that he did. They could have done this scene differently or shown us something else. But then like we're sitting here kind of sort of picking apart what we're seeing and trying to pinpoint how it happened still. And it's been like 20 years since this movie came out almost. And we're still sort of like dissecting this and talking about like, well, was it love? Was it power? Was it
George
this moment?
Lucas cameo
Was
right
it
here.
this other moment?
Sorry.
Yeah.
George Lucas cameo with his daughter. Anyway.
Yep.
As we're going into
this is
creepy
again,
opera.
this is arguably the best scene of the turn, right? Coming up here where we're at the opera.
With the music that sounds like it's from Eyes Wide Shut, but anyway.
The Mon Calamari opera.
The people who make Star Wars were so impressed with this scene that they recycled it in the Rise of Skywalker. So
No, well, of course. Okay, so the scene, if you're just listening right now, obviously, this is when Palpatine is going to start telling old Sith stories. We start learning about Darth Plagueis, and how he was able to cheat death, and then his apprentice killed him, which, Palpatine was Darth Plagueis's, apprentice. But but yeah. So what'd you think? Do you remember watching this in the theater the first time you hear about Darth Plagueis? Or what did you think about the scene? Did you think he was telling the truth, or do you think he was load of bunk? Everybody said, all Star Wars villains tell the truth. So, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that
Yeah,
it was.
yeah, same thing here. I think it was, the catch is he's not being 100% honest because he's telling the story of his master and how he killed him. So that's the bit of truth that he doesn't share, but everything else is probably 100% factual, which is kind of the way that evil works. Is that it coerces by with the truth, it twists with love.
So, and again, this, I I guess I can. Palpatine's looking for any sort of in to manipulate and win him over. I get it, and he's now using, he thought power, I suppose, would be it, and so he gets him on the Jedi Council, and then now it's going to be the whole Padme thing, um, but Palpatine, I just love the character. I just love the character. Just how, just I mean, he's the guy that you work with, that you just, there's something about him. He's nice, but it's like, so I don't trust him some way. I don't know. Just a great character, I think.
I was going to say that this is really, if this movie is anybody's movie, it is totally Ian McDiarmid. He puts on his best performance, start to finish. Everything hinges on him nailing the character of Palpatine and being both, the madman that we'll see later on, but also the seducer here, the corrupter, and he nails it perfectly. It's probably easy for him to do this kind of stuff given his theater background, but still, it's just. I mean, we're literally one of the best scenes is two guys sitting and him monologuing, and it works.
Yeah, this is like the clerk scene of Star Wars,
Yeah,
where it's
right.
just like two people monologuing, and it's just it's very good. The line, is it possible to learn that power not from a Jedi? I think they used that in the trailers. Um, it was just um, chef's kiss, perfection. Like this is where it the stuff hits the fan. Um, and the everything here, as far as when people talk about the faults of this film, I rarely hear anybody complain about any of this.
And by the way, the line that the dark side of the force is a pathway to what many people consider to be unnatural. I mean, I love that line. The way he delivers it,
Mhm.
just the way he delivers it. And actually, it's funny because you said they rehashed it for Rise of Skywalker, and that bothered me in Rise of Skywalker that it was literally line for line. It's like, I don't know.
You know what's interesting? Like I just thought though, like he's a copy of himself, so naturally he would be copying himself. Maybe I don't know.
Retcon Dave. There we go.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, but it's a good way to explain it. Maybe he saw all of it of himself and go, okay, I'm supposed to be cackling here, and I'm supposed to be throwing one-liners here,
And
and
then
this is the point where I
lightning.
turn lightning. Yeah. By the way, I love it. Here's the train. We finally get to see Kashyyyk, which we have been promised since originally it was supposed to be Return of the Jedi's big battle
yeah, but
before it changed to
we
Andor.
saw Kashyyyk on the holiday special, so um, I don't know.
Does
I
that
don't. I don't.
count?
So,
I don't. Okay. So, oh, by the way, okay. So we got Chewbacca here, and I just saw something actually in my news feed. This fan theory that's going through that episode 4, Obi-Wan goes to talk to Chewbacca before he goes to talk to Han. And given the fact that Chewbacca is, shoulder to shoulder with Yoda through this whole movie, and do you think Chewbacca was already a rebel spy asset, whatever, in episode 4? Because he knew everything that went down in episode 3. So
Possibly, but then we've also seen where he was found with by Han.
yeah, but I'm just saying he could still be. Maybe that's what got him in Imperial prison, and in the pit.
Could very well be. That's part of the dynamic. That's what's
This,
interesting.
yeah, and this stuff with Infus Nest may have been impactful for him, more so than even Han. Enough to convince him to want to get involved in some small way.
Because
And
putting him in this movie makes that whole scene where Han says he doesn't believe in the Force. Just how does Chewbacca even begin to just sit here and let him say it? Because it's like if we all seen the meme, he's like, dude, I've seen Jedi, I've seen all this stuff happen. What do you mean this isn't possible?
By the way, Tarzan yell.
Yeah, Tarzan yells great. I love it. But I do think too, like, there's something there, maybe. Like, just this idea that Han by episode 4, something happens to him. Like, he's completely jaded. He is not that way at the end of Solo. So, like, we still haven't gotten the story of how Han becomes, like, completely disillusioned.
Yeah, but that doesn't explain. I mean, it's like, but I do like the theory that maybe Chewbacca is already, and maybe Han doesn't know that he's a rebel informant doing something on the side. That's kind of interesting.
I love this little scene between Ewan and Hayden here. And we haven't really talked about Ewan yet, even though part of the reason we're watching this movie is because the Obi-Wan series is coming up. I think he does a really wonderful job here of sort of echoing what he got from Qui-Gon in the first movie, which was, this little pep talk. I'm going to encourage you. I'm going to tell you that I appreciate you. And I'm going to sort of prepare you to go out on your own. And Obi-Wan's doing that there in his own way. And it's really kind of lovely to see. And Ewan just continues.
It's one last reminder that they are brothers and friends because the next time they see each other, they're going to be trying to kill each other.
Yep.
So
it connects back to the little 5-minute scene and on Tatooine where Alec is telling Luke, old Ben's telling Luke that he was a good friend.
Yeah.
We've gotten to see very little of it throughout the course of this trilogy. So it's important, I think, that we see that they parted on good terms. And if also in a bit of melancholic, almost tragic terms, because I always wondered if Obi-Wan knew what was going through Anakin's head, if he knew everything that he was involved in, if he knew about him and Padme, would he have played it differently? Would he have tried to, be a stickler for the rules, or would he have tried to help them and find a way to help his friend in some kind of way? And that's one of the strategies that, the doors that are not taken, in terms of life and stories. It's that, had Obi-Wan known, maybe this, turns out differently.
I also like the don't ask, don't tell sort of relationship between Obi-Wan and Anakin, where it's like Obi-Wan knows that they're together, and yet doesn't really ask him about it or force him to reveal it.
They also kind of hit on that in the Clone Wars, the last 4 episodes.
I always got that vibe though from the last half of this movie that he knew. Like, why would you think to go see Padme and stow aboard her ship unless you know? It's like, yeah, he knew before that moment.
And the other thing is because we've seen, Clone Wars makes a good comparison between the relationship between Obi-Wan and Satine and Anakin and Padme, meaning, that he was also in a romantic relationship with somebody equally talented, equally capable, but that unfortunately they chose their duties, and eventually she did die because of it. Um, so they went the opposite way of where Anakin and Padme were, where they went, nope, we're gonna go with where our heart still is, and to heck with the galaxy.
So the guy from Utapau here, it's the same, we talked about it a couple weeks ago, same species as the Sith Inquisitor, or the Grand Inquisitor, which I only learned about about a month ago, which I find kind of interesting. I will say coming up here is old man Aaron's going to come up here again. I do not mind the chase between Obi-Wan and Grievous. I really mind it being on the back of a giant iguana. Because it was goofy and it wasn't really well done. It kind of looked Harry Potterish to me. I mean, they just should have put him on some sort of speeder. I would have even probably taken a space Vespa, over the big lizard.
I winced when I saw that he was going to do that, and I thought, "Oh no!" Because the effects at the end of Attack of the Clones were some of the worst effects I've ever seen. When like Anakin's like trying to ride the back of the thing, and it all looks super fake. I will say that the 3 years saw significant improvements, so I was sort of pleasantly satisfied with this in comparison. But still, I had a real similar moment where I was like, oh no, we're having this happen, and then I was like, oh well, that's not quite as bad.
Here's my one issue with the big lizard here. If he's trying to be incognito, if he's trying to hide or be sneaky, there is no way to be sneaky with this big sucker that's making all these noise. Like, if you're trying to be hidey, be the same sneak that you saw in episode 2, this is not the way.
Caw caw.
It's just dumb. Again, like I said, put him on a speeder, or have the same. I didn't really even like Grievous's wheelie bike, but just put him on one of those. So it goes, kind of mirrors Jedi when Luke's on a speeder bike and the biker scouts are on a speeder bike. It's okay, well, whatever.
All right, so this is a nice bit of foreshadowing, though, where he tells the Separatist leaders to go to Mustafar, and you're like, none of these people are coming back alive. I mean, I know enough about the lore to know that some stuff's about to go down on Mustafar. This is a bad situation for these guys.
That's a really good point, Dave, is that this is kind of the opposite of, Solo. One of my problems with Solo is I know everybody is getting out of this. Everybody's going to be fine in some of these things. But here in this movie, only a couple people are getting out of this. The only people who are getting out of this movie are Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Yoda, and Bail, I suppose. Really, those are the main 4 that are, and I guess Palpatine, sure, but everybody else is gonna buy it somehow, and that becomes interesting. It's like, how are we gonna lose this one? How is this one gonna go?
Yeah, and this is really when it starts kicking into overdrive. Well, like this sequence, like as impressive as Grievous looks here with the 4 lightsabers, I'm like, you're toast, buddy. Obi-Wan's going to take you down.
And also just from the standpoint of, I mean, it's a very fun duel. This is, one of the few things that I wish that the prequels had leaned into, because we had the duel between Qui-Gon, Maul, and Obi-Wan, and then we have this one, and then the rest are very much traditional human on human lightsaber dual fencing. So I wish we had gotten more of this stuff where it's just like weird and wacky and completely unique, just because it would have been interesting to see
So,
that. I also think in terms of the separatist leaders, it's like at some point you almost wish like one of these guys got a clue that okay, we may be starting to become disposable, but you never get enough time with them to know whether or not they even realize that they've lost. And again, that goes all back to Palpatine's plans that nobody knows they're kaput until it's done.
can I be? I've always wondered this in some of these movies. It's like, do you think there are decisions made because the people who are designing the video game want certain things? For example, the buzz droids in the opening, sequence. Let's have Grievous like with 4 lightsabers because that'd be a really bad boss at the end of this level. And
Oh,
oh,
the whole sell more toys thing, it's like we've got to sell more toys. So here's another character, kids, and oh look, here's the wheelie bike thing, and you got to buy the wheelie bike thing,
and by the way, I
and
don't think I needed to see Grievous running around like a spider either, but that's okay. I mean,
I feel like okay, so George is sort of the victim of his own ambition at times, I would say. It's like, oh, I'm going to put in this lizard. It's like, well, why did you choose to put in the lizard? It's like, well, because I can. The technology will allow me to do it. And it's like, well, maybe not, maybe, but maybe it's not the best choice. And this is when your argument of maybe he's surrounded by too many yes men begins to take hold because it's like, yeah, you probably could have done without the lizard and the wheelie bike and Grievous walking on all fours, but it's like um he does it because he thinks that he can and he thinks it would be a unique visual. And on the one hand, I respect him sort of pushing the envelope, but I also feel like that at times he should be told no.
Well, and here, just for example, and this is where this is a movie that's only about 2 hours, 2.5 hours thereabouts, maybe a bit under. But you're gonna see Anakin just go run back and forth between the Jedi Temple and Palpatine's office, delivering a message that could have been done via a hologram because they're trying to kind of speed up the process now of creating the confrontation between between Sidious and the Jedi Council, Palpatine and the Jedi Council.
by the way, that little hologram session again in the Clone Wars, the final season, Ahsoka ends up like joining that Skype call right after Anakin leaves the room. I just find that really cool how they splice those together. Um, Now Anakin has come to the Chancellor's office.
I mean, and to your point, Fredo, we're about halfway through the movie, and it feels like we're building towards the climax here. I mean, the way that Obi-Wan has engaged with Grievous and what we were talking about earlier with the stakes, we know people are going to be dying. The Separatists are on Mustafar. He's confronting Palpatine. Anakin is. Um, you are already getting a sense of, oh gosh, we've got momentum here. Things are really starting to happen. And we're not even an hour, we're like over an hour away from the end of the movie. Um, and so, like, this is what I was talking about earlier when I'm like, this movie was jam packed with stuff, and it was like the last half of this movie is all climax.
So let's play what if. What if things really turned south here? Who do you think would have won in the fight, Palpatine or Anakin?
My money's on Palpy.
Yeah, because like that little line that he gives where he says Darth Vader will be more powerful than either of us. It's like he's still not at his full potential. Anakin. And he acknowledges that. And again, I think like the idea is that he will become the most powerful until he gets sliced in half by Obi-Wan. But yeah, I would take Palps in the
Yeah,
fight here.
he certainly doesn't. He certainly does not seem threatened. He can tell that that Anakin's onto him. And he knows that he has the upper hand.
The little smile.
Yeah, the smile. Right. Yeah, that's
from certain death.
And part of me wonders. I mean, he's not because part of what I realize is, use my knowledge. I beg you. Is that he is very much playing into what he knows of Anakin. He's playing on his emotions. He's playing on his love. He's playing on his mistrust. And would he have told them if all that he's telling them if he hadn't led him down the garden path?
And
You
I
see, like
guess,
even now.
oh yeah, I was just gonna say like he says a life of conscience, and I always think that it's interesting turn of phrase because the Jedi don't have conscience. It's like no, they're so beholden to their way of doing things. It's all reactionary for them. They don't consider things. They don't sit and think.
I also like how Palpatine's voice changes in this moment to the Emperor. Basically, it gives you focus, makes you power. He gets that spitty, growly Emperor voice. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Dave. That was
no, I agree.
By the way, and this is where we're having Anakin kill Dooku at the start also helps him because he saw how much doubt that put into Anakin's conscience. It's like, oh, you're supposed to be a Jedi. Jedi don't kill. Jedi don't seek revenge, And then all of a sudden you're confronted with the ultimate villain or the ultimate enemy. And instead of being like, nope, I'm just going to do what I've done so many other times during the Clone Wars. I'm just going to run you through and solve the problem. He's full of doubt because he doesn't know what to do because he's listened to Palpatine for so long.
Yeah. I mean, it's twofold, right? It's really about that the fact that this is a friend of his who's been in his ear for, 20 years. But it's also a convenient thing for him that he recently had a slip up and doesn't want to do it again.
So the fight between Obi-Wan and Grievous. I can't believe he tries, to like throw fisticuffs against a robot, but whatever.
Yeah. And like kicks him at one point and breaks his own leg almost. Yeah, it's just come on.
So the at the beginning of their fight when he jumps down, he says hello there. It's like that was kind of cute, but I felt it was kind of over the topish. But the line that I really dug. Yeah, go and kick the shin of a robot. Yeah, that's really smart. The one line that I really loved here was after he uses the blaster to kill Grievous, which first of all was very interesting that Obi-Wan, that's how he takes out Grievous is with a blaster. But I just love he just says, "How uncivilized." And that was a cute line. That was a cute line.
It's not a callback to something we know that there was some feeling that we've heard of him express.
And if Grievous's death didn't give little kids nightmares, I don't know what would. But anyway.
Well, he was a robot, right? I mean, he's just a robot. That's fine. But then you see like his guts like burning inside of him.
There's fire coming out of his eye holes and everything.
Yeah. Foreshadowing. We're headed to Mustafar soon.
I thought you were going to say foreshadowing. Oh, never mind. There's a lot of the politics in this movie that back in, between 2016 and 2020, I sometimes wondered if we were going to be living that in real life. But anyway, I'll get away from that.
Well, that was the lesson he wanted to touch on, George, which was just like most times when you see the Great Republic fall, it's from within. and from corruption
from
rather than
autocracy.
external.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and it's not from external forces, it's from these internal forces that just corrupt the heck out of everything and tear it down from the inside out. And
I
good
want to say I
lord.
wish we would have gotten more Mace Windu other than Mace Windu at the office. I mean, I liked Mace Windu in the arena in episode 2.
Mhm.
And I like the things he does in this movie. I wish we would have gotten even more of Mace Windu. Because I think that seems to be a
Well,
complex character that, you know, has.
did you see that Samuel L. Jackson was actually interviewed and he said, "Yeah, I've heard that they want me to bring me back." I'm like, "Please, George, want to bring me back?"
Well, yeah, he reached out to Bryce Dallas Howard, right? And
Exactly.
yeah, and so like he's talking to her about like, hey, bring me back, and she's thinking about it. Maybe I don't know. Okay, so
By the way,
this sequence is made by the music, and we're not going to be sitting here humming the music, but um, it's just so haunting. Um,
and I think this is one of the examples of how um, Star Wars has lived and died by the music of John Williams.
mm-hmm.
Because here you got a scene of no dialogue, two people staring out of windows across miles of city, looking at one another, and you understand everything that's playing between them in terms of their emotional state, what they're thinking about, what's been troubling them. And again, this is the beauty in Star Wars is that there's no dialogue and we're getting all that information because of what's on screen and the tone that the music is hitting us with.
He could have like made so many like this should have been it could have been so easy to screw this part up, right? Like, oh, let me put the two of them in a room together and have them bounce, terrible George Lucas dialogue off of one another. But no, it's like, no, let's lean into our strengths. I'm a visual storyteller. And I have John Williams sitting here next to me. Let's let the music and the pictures tell the story. Um, and I think it works really beautifully.
I'm going to go back over to the horse and beat it here for a little bit because here again, I want to say with the whole Padme thing, I wish it would have also been Anakin's fear of letting her down and, becoming something that she didn't think he was rather than worried about her dying. I don't know, but so let's get into this battle here. Palpatine versus the
That's the
Keystone
Jedi Council.
Cops.
All
I
right,
don't
so
know.
Sam Jackson brought 3 Jedi with him. What are you doing?
And they all get. I mean,
They get murdered in like
they'll
2
just
seconds.
they'll just stand there like Batman villains.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
I don't.
No, this isn't the best direction here with the way that
Well,
it's. But I know that he's trying to convey that Sidious is like
powerful.
unstoppable. Yeah, powerful. You can't take him down. But again, the hubris of the Jedi. Like you're only going to bring 4 people in to apprehend the greatest threat to the entire galaxy,
And
and
for
maybe
Jedi only. Like
yeah.
not even a senator, not called Bail Organa. Like you're about to assume command or control over the galaxy, and you don't think, we might want to bring some other representatives of the government to say, hey, this guy, he needs to concede his powers or he needs to be arrested. And doesn't cross to them in their hubris that their actions might be perceived as the wrong ones. By the way, it's famously known that Ian McDermott hated the lightsaber duels. He found them, he did not enjoy doing them at all, which is why you get a lot of this, um, the way that this is cut.
Yeah, with close-ups and him snarling and yeah.
So here, okay. So I know they obviously, because he's going to start shooting some Force lightning here in a minute, and it's going to start getting reflected onto him because we needed to explain how the Emperor looked all old and crap. 15 years later.
Do you care about that?
Well, but I mean,
one way or the other.
Well, I mean, I don't, but I'm just wondering.
Yeah.
But here again, it gets into like why did we need that? Because I would have been fine with, you know, it's like the guy, you know, it's kind of like one of my wife's stories from, you know, she was teaching and her students found out how old she was, and they couldn't believe it. They said, "You don't look that old." And one of the guys says, "Well, that's because, you know, you don't look old when you're not a hateful, you know, B word." And so I guess I didn't need this. And again, but it doesn't ruin it for me. But again, here's another little nuance here. Instead of slicing off Mace Windu's arm because I need him to help me save Padme, it's like, you know what, Mace? I'm sick of your crap. You have been pushing people around too much and trying to influence your own. So off with your arm. That's a Darth Vader thing to do. You know,
and I'm not sure he doesn't like say that, but I always felt like that was part of it, right? Like the reason Mace is the person here confronting Palpatine is because he's the guy that came down on Anakin the hardest.
Anakin's just he says no, I need him, and he's acting selfishly. So I get that, but I wish it would have been a little bit more. I'm sick of your crap. Now, how about this? Mace Windu goes flying here pretty soon, but we never see him die. Do you think Mace Windu is still alive? Will we still find out that he's the one that saved Baby Yoda from the Jedi Temple? Because
I'm not sure that would be number one on his list. After just being
not to go find Baby Yoda, but he hits the ground and it's like, oh, crap's going down. I got to get to the Jedi Temple and warn people. And that's when the 501st are all, you know, in there. So he grabs whatever he can and hits the road. Hey, we've all played the video games where you can force heal yourself, and it's also part of Star Wars lore now that you can use the Force to heal. So I still think that is a possibility. That we're going to get a little bit of a flashback, and it's going to be Mace Windu coming to, and then going, I got to get to the temple.
It is not currently the plan because Sam is publicly...
Doesn't have to be Sam Jackson. It can be Sam Jackson. I mean, they made Mark Hamill look like 50 years younger. So,
but dude is out here like publicly campaigning to be pulled back into the universe. So he is not currently part of the universe. I feel confident in saying. So I don't think I buy that. And I never really thought, like, when people were like, "Oh, he might still be alive," I'm like,
No, might be.
He got electrocuted.
I never say never because they cut.
Yeah.
I mean, they cut Darth Maul in half, and the dude came back, and that he was cutting half because George knew that if he didn't do that, people would suspect he'd come back.
So, Palpatine.
So you could see him back.
Palpatine coming up with Anakin's new name reminded me of when I got my drumline nickname in college. Section leader came up to me and said, "You need a nickname, don't you?" I was like, "Yeah." And he said, "Let's see, Swoboda, Bodhisattva." I was like, "All right." I said, "What is that?" He said, "Well, it's a stage of consciousness just below Nirvana, or it's a really good Steely Dan song." And that's just the way it's. He just goes, "You will be known as, your Delta Tau pledge name is Pinto." Why? Why not?
Yeah, he's Pinto. I mean, yeah. Vader is Pinto.
So, all right. So let's talk about this here. When you first saw Revenge of the Sith, what did you think about the whole idea of Order 66?
Well, I liked that. And before we get to that,
I thought it was a genius idea.
I will say right before this, though, when he says, "I pledge myself to your teachings," right? That was like the one part of the turn that I was always like, really? Like, really? We're really ready to do that? Like, you were just conflicted a moment ago.
Yeah, and now you're all in.
And
yeah.
now you're like, I pledged myself. It's like, yeah, we're gonna do that anyway. Order 66 is great. It's a really smart idea, I think. And it really sort of underscores like what the heck was going on with the clones at the very beginning. Like in Attack of the Clones, like why did he have a clone army made? What's going on here? Like why are the Jedi just suddenly going with it?
And I'm
You know,
sure
you
that
get this payoff here.
I'm sure that when he sat down to write it, it's like, what are the things, what are the big dots we need to connect? We need to have all the Jedi gone by the end of the third movie, for all intents and purposes. So how are we going to do that? Without creating another big space laser. I dug it. Thought it was, and I also like since how we've seen it in different, iterations in Bad Batch and Clone Wars.
If you play Jedi Fallen Order, you actually play through Order 66 as Cal Kestis as you're trying to get away, and your master who's trying to protect you. And it's again, they always do, LucasArts and all the people who grew up with this prequels. They know that this Order 66 hits them in the emotional feels, and they find ways to make it hurt, which is what it should. This is a seminal moment. It's supposed to feel like a big old Greek tragedy come to life.
A lot of the combat sequences, they're just showing some different, battle sequences here, and a lot of this stuff they did a better job with over the previous films. I think I remember reading that they brought in like ex-military to like act out a lot of these sorts of scenes with the clones, running around gunning people down and stuff. It does play a little more realistic.
And we know that from the Clone Wars, but there's been several generations of clones now involved. This isn't even the first generation that we saw in episode 2. So we know that they've gotten better, they've gotten smarter, they've instructed better in terms of what they're planning to know, what they're needing them to do for the Clone Wars. And here it comes, Order 66.
And I was more worried that the lizard was going to die. I'm glad the lizard made it out. But this is a powerful sequence.
The reason that this that I know that this works as well as it does, and at the time I had a visceral emotional reaction to all of this, is when we get to the end of it and you see Yoda.
Yeah.
And like I'm thinking to myself, holy crap, they're going to off Yoda. And I'm like completely oblivious to the fact that I know that he survives this movie, but I'm like, holy crap, they're gonna kill Yoda. And like I had forgotten because it was so engrossing. Like, again, a lot of these characters you don't get to know very well, and I'd say that that's a fair criticism and a failing. But they lead it off with Obi-Wan. And you're like, oh gosh. And now, some of these characters we've grown attached to more than others through summer reading and things like that. But gosh.
Right, Plo Koon right there.
Yeah.
No, and it's a really excellently executed sequence, which again leans strongly on the music, leans strongly on the visuals. We know what we're seeing, we know how we're connecting with it. This is meant to connect with us as much emotionally as it is intellectually. That's why that little moment with Yoda dropping his staff and just reaching for his heart just kind of connects with me, because I go, well, of course they're all tied through the Force. They would know one another. Of course, he would feel these deaths all over the galaxy.
So this is the awesome part when they are going to try to off Yoda, and he's one step ahead of him.
It's this moment of relief and catharsis because you've been watching this unfold, and then boom, but good guys get a moment back.
Yoda clenching his chest. I mean, that obviously harkens back to Episode 4 when Obi-Wan reacts to Alderaan being destroyed. But also, I like how they played it in Episode 7 when Han is killed and Leia feeling that loss. Um,
Yeah, because the Force is all about energy and it's all about that emotional connection. So you feel that even if you're not there.
and how about this scene when you saw it in the theater of Anakin firing up his lightsaber with a bunch of little kids? That was like, holy
Well,
cow, we're going there.
well,
um,
I mean, again, he's the villain. He's the ultimate bad guy, and
and that
you don't get
little
more bad than this.
and the kid giving that little flinch when the lightsaber fires up,
Mm-hmm.
it's still, it's just like, oh. And here comes
But again, and here comes Bail Organa, and again, the point is he's trying to figure out just what the heck just happened, and goes back to the hubris and the failings of the Jedi, where you go like, you guys should have at least kept this guy informed of what the heck
Yeah,
was going on. At
yeah.
least they have communicators, they have holograms, they have all this stuff, but it doesn't occur to them in the 5 minute shuttle ride to go, hey, this is what we found out, this is what we're gonna do in case anything goes wrong. You're a backup, but and then he gets this front row seat to the Jedi Purge without any idea what the heck is going on.
there's George Lucas's son,
Yep.
Jet. Uh,
Little
By the way,
jet out there.
why are they trying to like don't worry about him, let him go? I'm like, okay,
yeah,
that
yeah.
would seem odd to
Their
me.
orders were to get Jedi, not to kill a senator. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, that was kind of weird. Um,
I mean, like you've cemented this man's stance against the current government. Like he was already opposed to a lot of what was going on, and now that moment was enough to get him to fully commit. Um, I guess from that perspective, it's kind of a nice moment to in terms of laying the groundwork for the rebellion.
do you think it should have been Chewbacca, or do you think it just should have been another Wookiee, just Tarful and somebody else? Do you think?
Seemed oddly coincidental to me,
Yeah,
but
yeah. It was.
It's coincidental, but it's also a bit of a homage, and it's the only time we really, at this point you were expecting that this was going to be the last movie, so you're like, okay, if this is the last we're going to see, at least we get to say goodbye, and it's a good fend off, and again, it doesn't detract. Not as much as Bail Organa still having the same ship 18 years later detracts, and the same captain, it's same chauffeur.
Hey, that ship makes it back in the Rise of Skywalker. Um,
yeah, yeah, those are
The
strong
Tempest 4.
ships. Commander
Oh, and
Cody.
by the way, and I will give props to George in this regard. I love the fact that because he had us see the chase leading to Grievous's ship earlier, and you think, okay, that's what that's there for, and it doesn't come back till you see Obi-Wan jump on it, and you go, oh, that's how he's getting away from them, and you're like, that's a clever way because that's
Mm.
not registered with the Republic. They're not expecting it. They don't know it's there, so it makes perfect sense. That's how you get out.
Which presumably, again, was what Grievous was trying to achieve
Exactly.
when they landed there in the first place, and their little final duel was Grievous was trying to get away.
Do you think he still has that ship in the series? Like if Obi-Wan's meant to go off world after this, during in the upcoming series, do you think that ship's buried somewhere in the Tatooine desert?
It might be because by the end of this, he has to get back on Tatooine, and this ship has been docked with Bale's ship.
yeah,
So yeah, might be the
or
same ship.
or the Bale's ship could have just landed on Tatooine as well. Um,
Mm.
Yeah, he is.
That's a fun. It's a fun idea though. Like we might see that ship again in a few weeks. I don't know.
Here, now I'm starting to see, Anakin as Darth Vader here. I mean, he just slaughtered a bunch of children, and he's trying to make lovey-dovey with his, with his wife. Is very Charles Starkweather-ish. Sorry, that's some Nebraska lore for you, but
Have faith, my
It,
love.
yeah.
it's very much the kind of narcissistic and dangerous behavior that a sociopath would engage in. Look, it doesn't matter how many younglings I just slaughtered. Our love will last this. It's like, dude, right, go back. What did you just say?
Look, there's no room for R2 in that ship. No room.
I think they remove his head and like the rest of his body like goes somewhere else, right?
There's no room for R2 in that ship.
Yeah.
Drives me bonkers. Anyway.
By the way, you're gonna get to see like, okay, Tripia says he feels so helpless here, and you see Padme kind of starting having a moment here. Do you think it's beginning to dawn on her that this might not end up working out between them at this point?
Yeah, I mean like when she is like losing it earlier, when the Jedi Temple is going up in flames. I always sort of read that as being like she's not sure of what's going on fully. Like not just that like, oh, I'm worried for my husband and for these other people, but also this is some hanky stuff. I'm not quite sure where we're going right now.
So how'd you guys? Sorry, on a totally different thing. Just seeing Yoda walking the halls here. How'd you guys feel in episode 2 and 3 with, especially maybe episode 3 with CGI Yoda versus puppet Yoda?
Huge improvement. Yeah.
3 years between 2 and 3 really show in terms of technology. I mean, particularly in his movements, like you can kind of see where this character will end up being the puppet in episode 5, even if it's still not the same, just because again, there's a difference of years. But I think this one gets it better, even though you can clearly tell it's a CGI character.
And here we are on Mustafar, which, kids, is the same planet as the beginning of Rise of Skywalker, where it has trees. So, yeah. Got to do some reading to understand how that came to be, but yeah, whatever. um,
There's different parts of the planet, Aaron. Like some parts.
no, all Star Wars the planets are one biome.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Sorry. Um, and piloting this ship is, I believe, the guy who played Boba Fett. Yeah.
Or Morrison or Josh Bullock.
No, Jeremy Bullock. Jeremy Bullock. Yeah, he's the
Jeremy
he's
Bullock.
the he's the
Not,
pilot
not
on the
not the
left.
former. Yeah, Josh Bullock's a former Nebraska Saints player,
Yeah.
DB.
So, yeah, it's Jeremy Bullock piloting Bale's ship. And coming up here, I absolutely adore Obi-Wan and Yoda, a wampin' and a whalin'. That's coming later. Sorry, we're going back to Mustafar.
We get a little foreshadowing here where he's like, "Oh yes, I am here to take care of them."
Yeah, he will take care of you. Yes, I love that line was really good.
How important is it that he tells R2 to stay with the ship?
Oh, I think it's very important, right?
Well, I
I
say
mean,
that's
he
why
knows.
R2 wouldn't stay with the ship like Luke told him to, because last time when Anakin told him to stay with the ship, then bad things happened. So, it's kind of an interesting little tidbit there.
Oh yeah, like and R2 we know is the eyes and ears of everyone. He's the surrogate
He's
and
seen everybody. Yeah.
yeah, and Anakin did not want him seeing what's about to unfold.
By the way, we know from the Clone Wars that that Anakin knows Viceroy's gun range. And it strikes me weird that at this point he's not like, wait a minute, Anakin Skywalker, you're Lord Vader.
Oh well, here's the fight though that
Yeah.
Aaron was talking about, where Yoda flings his lightsaber through a clone's chest,
Said
and
Yoda and Obi-Wan a whomping and a whooping. Um,
but yeah, a lot going on here. Again, I like the score during this sequence when we watch him Palpatine deliver his speech and Anakin mow down the Separatists. Um, it's powerful. But I guess we have a moment with, oh, who could have done this first? And this is again good acting from Ewan. Um, for prequel fans, like this has to be such a happy time, like to get the Obi-Wan series.
yeah, I mean, listening to some other podcasts that grew up with the prequels, they are just overjoyed. Um, okay, so it's clear Yoda knows everything now. Something. I mean, he knows Anakin is behind it. He knows everything that is going on, and it just shows how much ahead of the game he was as far as being a Jedi than everybody else on the council.
And we see that reinforced in the Clone Wars
Yeah.
when he's doing some of these things with the nature of the Force that a lot of the other Jedi aren't.
By the way, I was going to say, I do find it intriguing that, well, not intriguing, but it was fun to see that, okay, they were killed by a lightsaber. Who could have done this? And then the cut to, Anakin using his lightsaber to destroy the separatist leadership. And then you get that moment with the bright yellow eyes of Lord Vader. And it always make me wonder, it's like, I'm surprised we didn't get to see more of that, throughout what's left of this movie. Because next time you see him all tearful and sad about what he's done.
That was a really interesting design choice to give him the eyes that like Darth Maul had, um, because like that wasn't a thing
But now everybody thinks
necessarily.
it's a thing. By the way, it's like, oh,
Yeah,
I mean, the minute that you see in a trailer just the hint of non-white eyes, then oh, they got Sith eyes, and it's like that's yeah, you're right. It's not a thing. I mean, it was a Darth Maul thing, and then yeah, that it was an interesting choice here because you only see it once.
hmm
It's just once.
It's meant to highlight that idea of his descent to the dark side.
And by the way, this what Obi Wan's messing with now, that was originally what was supposed to happen in Episode 9. They were supposed to go to Coruscant and um, reconfigure that signal or something, right? Wasn't that the original plot point? So
It was supposed to be, if I believe, Finn and Rose going in there to reconfigure the signal to call to people to join the resistance.
I was always confused by coming up here in a minute when you got Palpatine and Anakin right there in the Jedi. So did Palpatine come to the temple?
yeah,
Of course
they
he did.
probably
Of course.
yeah.
I know he eventually makes the temple his like office, in the books and everything. But um, that was just
Yeah,
I
I
was a
just
little
I
confused.
figured he wouldn't trust him fully at this point,
Sure,
right? You
sure.
know,
Come and checking
he's
on
like,
him.
I'm gonna double check your work and make sure you did okay.
I mean, in college football terms, this is like when, a school rushes the field. So he's rushing the field right now to celebrate, especially when it's the field of your opponent.
Here talking about bad decisions. Yoda might be right that Obi-Wan's not might not be powerful enough to beat Palpatine, but to send him to take out even especially when Obi-Wan says I can't, he's my brother, then Yoda at that point should have said, all right, yeah, okay, you take the old guy, I'll take this one then, because we can't, I mean, he's got to be taken out. So, but then that would mess up everything. But um,
And that's one of the trappings that the prequels had. They had to fit what we knew had come before,
yeah,
meaning Luke and Obi-Wan and Anakin fought at some point, which is what led to him becoming Vader. We need to see that happen, and this is we're being led to that point.
I didn't like the line "killing younglings." Let's just say killing
children.
children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Killing younglings.
It was putting back the younglings. It's like this, this scene needs gravitas and seriousness. We don't need to talk about midi-chlorians and younglings and, Star Warsies. But,
But it kind of goes back to that same point I was saying earlier. George is trying to have his cake and eat it too in regards to the character of Anakin and Vader. Like, he wants Vader to be the ultimate bad guy, but he also wants to show, there's still some good in him and he can be redeemed. And I almost feel like he cut himself short, that by doing that, he really didn't do a good enough job of showing just how much of a villain Vader truly becomes, because everybody needs to believe that there's no point back to from Vader and Anakin, because we know that in episode 6 there is a way back and Luke finds it, but nobody else is supposed to see it but him.
it is wild watching the original trilogy, particularly 4, right after having watched this movie. Like if you end up doing like a marathon at any point, because it's just like you see Anakin at the beginning of that movie, like torturing his daughter, and
well, that's why Rogue One is so important now, right?
yeah. I mean, it gives you a little bit of a bridge between the two.
And there's Anakin. By the way, is there a cleanup service for all those bodies that he left behind? Like who comes and cleans up? Like, is somebody going like, damn it, we had another Sith Lord come here and kill
Yeah,
people?
probably got some droids. I mean, it's like 3PO throwing Jawas on the fire.
Yep, it's always the droids who have
Droids
to
just
do it.
pitch them over into the lava. And of course, we got to get 3PO on the ship because he has to be there in episode 4.
The moment here where he goes, "Oh dear," and then runs up the ramp. This is one of the weirdest mismatches of dialogue and action. Because he says "oh dear" and it doesn't line up with his body action, and he throws his arms up in the air. It's really reminiscent of that scene in 4. There's around the conference table
when Vader says something, then stops talking, and then starts pointing.
And then
yes.
and then he's like waving his hand afterward, and it's like one of the only sort of editing, like old school editing mishaps that you see. But yeah.
This might be the first time we see lamps in Star Wars, desk lamps.
I wonder if there are glasses on that desk now. Now I want to know. It's like, because we've been saying glasses didn't show up till later, but
By the way, he's still Palpatine tells Anakin, keeps telling Anakin, okay, send an order to the Trade Federation droids, tell them to stand down and shut themselves off immediately. And then here comes Padme's ship. It's like, did he have time between that and then to just send that signal? Because it seems like there wasn't much time there.
yeah, I don't think that happened right away, and that was probably something that we probably get a little more hint of later on, where some of these units are still like out there. They talk about that in Rebels, where you see like, oh gosh, there's there's still clones, or there's still battle droids
Yeah.
out there, and it's like, well, that could be why right there. That little throwaway bit of dialogue.
Okay, so this was also awkward in that when Anakin immediately jumps to the conclusion that Padme and Obi-Wan are together. That's the inference, right? That,
Mm-hmm.
oh, you're cheating on me with my best friend. That was always awkward, you know.
Yeah, I feel like there might be like some deleted scenes that would have hinted more at that, and yeah, it's believable given where Anakin's
Anakin's
head
not thinking
is.
clearly. Yeah, I
Yeah,
get it, but
yeah,
it's
yeah.
um,
But I would have. It would have been interesting to have like maybe just a little bit more earlier in the movie to
so
point.
okay. So to Fredo's point earlier, where it's like, okay, so George was painted into a corner because all the things we had to make sure aligned to Episode 4, right? And so I do know from what I said from my marching band days when I would uh, write drill, and I knew that in the closing song, I wanted a specific formation at a specific point in the music, and sometimes the formations leading up to that suffered because I was thinking of so it was like, okay, that works. It's not great, but it works because ultimately I want to get to this one point. And I think there's a lot of that in this movie. And I think there's a lot of that in The Rise of Skywalker. It's like or actually, in some of the sequel movies. So, so I understand that because it's like, okay, I need to get here. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but the problem is that it's not perfect leading up to it, you know? So, oh, you're breaking my heart, and that's what's going to kill me. Ugh.
I loved this. I mean, full confession, when I saw this for the first time in the theaters, I loved it, and this is the movie that I've seen in theaters more than any other movie. And it was because of like where my mind head was with all of this.
He can break her heart, but that can't be why she dies. Anyway, go ahead.
At the time, this was the last Star Wars movie,
Yeah.
right? Um, so it's like I'm going with it. Um, yeah, are there certain things where it's like, oh, that's a little cheesy or whatever? This is acted very well. You may not like the dialogue, but it comes out as being believable to me because of the performances, because like they are giving it their all here. Um,
By
would
the
a
way,
rewrite have might have helped here and there, maybe, but I love this anger that's coming out here, and it's like, okay, yeah, this is where he would be. He is off the reservation.
Well,
there's a little
and
bit of failure in writing here coming up though. First of all, I love Ewan McGregor's acting here, and I love Hayden Christensen's until he says you underestimate my power. But anyway, um, this line coming up when Obi-Wan says, "Only the Sith deal in absolutes." That sentence is an absolute.
Yeah, that
Only
got the
only
internet
the
nerds really
only
angry at
the
the time.
Sith deal in absolutes.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah. So anyway, and
I mean
again,
it's a play on, but
no, I don't think I don't really think it's a play on anything. I'll let you finish your thought here. I still think that there weren't enough people in the room to say to George Lucas, you know, you know, here,
no,
honest
what it
feedback.
is, it's George Lucas copying George W. Bush. He's taking, because remember, these are all political. And George Lucas loves to stick in his politics into these stories. So this is him taking a line where George W. Bush went up before Congress and said, "If you're not with us, you're against us." So he's trying to borrow that same element and bring it here to make a commentary on how only the bad guys really say that. So
Yoda with
that's
the
where that's
Emperor's guards.
imprinted.
I love it. Sorry. Yeah, you're. I
Huh?
mean, I get that part, Fred. I'm just saying the one sentence: only Sith deal in absolutes. Obi-Wan Kenobi just said an absolute. So is Obi-Wan Kenobi a Sith?
Well, it could be a play on words too, and I've seen people defend that line of dialogue saying that it's deal in absolutes, like only a Sith deals in absolutes in terms of like making deals, etc. And it's like, okay, well now you're getting super hyper literal with it, but um, yeah, it's just, I think they could have used another rewrite. I mean, go back through it, but again, like I think Carrie was involved in this
He was.
rewrite, wasn't she?
Well, yeah.
And like not a lot of people like sit around and bag on Carrie Fisher's writing typically. So, um,
So what
But,
is
but
the?
it,
Go ahead, Fredo. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, just to follow up and agree with Dave regarding Hayden Christensen, who got maligned a great deal for particularly episode two, but I think even here he didn't get much plaudit. But he really sells the heck out of the emotional torment that Anakin has been living through. And in some ways, how liberating this must all be because you don't have to hide no more, you don't have to doubt no more, you can just let go.
Unpopular opinion: the Emperor Yoda fight I enjoy more than the Anakin Obi-Wan fight.
That's because he threw the whole Senate at him.
Yeah.
True story.
I agree with you. Um, for
Like,
whatever it's worth.
it's my chair. It looks like yeah, because Obi-Wan and Anakin just seems frantic, whereas Emperor and Yoda seem more calculated, you know. And I get it. The Obi-Wan Anakin one, it's all out of emotion. I get it.
Yeah, it's brother
I
against brother. Whether here is the two peaks of their order finally having it out after a millennia of uh, waiting for it.
Yeah, it's the Obi-Wan Anakin duel is not in, like anywhere close to like my top 5 or whatever, but um uh this stuff for me is so much more effective than Yoda Dooku in the previous film. Um I more buy that it's a thing that is occurring as opposed to just some digital effect.
And one of the things that George really and Sendralik or Nick Gillard really lean on, particularly for the Obi-Wan and Anakin duel, is the idea of because they're Jedi, because they're taught, he once taught the other, their movesets are so familiar, so that they're very much on par with one another. Uh, it's really interesting the way that their choreography mirrors the other. And it's because, of course, they will know what one another knows because one taught the other. Whereas uh, Palpatine and Yoda, oh no, there's no niceties about this. Yoda's flipping and twirling, but uh, Palpatine is just cackling.
So, we're gonna get Duel of the Fates back shortly, um, and they do their force push. They knock each other out, and then they come back at each other. They knock the shields out. You get to see that happen again. Visual storytelling. George is telling us like, oh, the shield's out, so now they are vulnerable to these lava surges. And again, clever.
Mm-hmm.
But now Duel of the Fates kicks back in. And I just like love it here because it leads straight into Duel for the Galaxy, Yoda in the Senate versus Palpatine. And this is just one of my all-time favorite moments. Chucking the Senate pods.
Which in itself is very symbolic of Palpatine destroying democracy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, he's literally tearing down democracy. You know,
And he's using the power that he's kept hidden for so long to do it. in a way which nobody but Yoda can challenge him. I mean, I'll admit, like I said, Ian McDermott has stated that he's not necessarily a fan of all the big CGI duels and action scenes, but he seems like he's having a ball doing this.
Okay, so there went Yoda's lightsaber. The next
Yep.
time we see that lightsaber is in the Book of Boba Fett. I want to
That's
know.
correct.
I want to know how Luke ended up getting that lightsaber. I want to see that in a comic book, and I don't have to see it in live action. I want to know that story. I also want to know how Luke's lightsaber came into Maz Kanata's, possession. So
That to me is the more interesting one, just because the last time we saw it, it's fallen down past Ben's clouds. Whereas I could make a case where, basically one of the troopers finds it in the rubble, hands it to Palpatine, and he keeps it in his office as a trophy for the next 20 some odd years until uh, Luke goes into his office and gets it. So there's a way to explain that that makes sense. I still have no idea how Maz ended up with the Skywalker lightsaber.
now
I
this,
will also say that I feel like I saw it on the floor, like a few feet away from him when he hit the ground. So I'm like,
maybe he
just picked
grabbed
that
it.
up.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, so I get it that we got a little homage to like pirate movies and Errol Flynn, Robin Hood type stuff, but this is when the lightsaber duel starts getting a little ridiculous. When we start swinging on, poles and balance beams and everything. All right, let's look. Does Yoda have he has his communicator?
Is it in his belt? Let's see. He's got his communicator thing.
And I think Bail Organa has a different car. He changes new cars like as much as Padme changes hairdos. Um,
He is a senator, so maybe that's what he let. Padme's got her wardrobe, whereas Bale has cars.
um, but like I said,
By the way, speaking
this just seems to be like I said when the whole duel becomes ridiculous. And actually, when I first thought it, was like when they land on the boxes and they're floating on the lava. It's just like, ugh.
But do you think, and in part, do you think they're almost trapped by the overwhelming weight that has been placed on this duel by the fan base? Like it's been built to be a big deal, so they couldn't just give us just another duel. They had to go somewhere epic and on top of,
That's why
somewhere to try to beat every other duel.
I think you're absolutely right, and that's why I love Dave Filoni's choice of the Obi-Wan Maul duel is, you know, hit block slice and we're done.
Right.
It's very much the Indiana Jones. Shoot once and the guy's down. I think you're absolutely right, Fredo. It's like people have been talking about this lightsaber duel for 30 years, so we've got to do something. He doesn't have his lightsaber on him unless it's in his jammies. But
could be in his jammies.
Yeah. But so yeah, it's like they just have to go over the top. Yeah.
Wait, it looked like he had it. It looked like he had it in that shot. We're gonna have to do freeze framing with this to get a full ruling on Yoda's lightsaber. But yeah, there are a lot of reasons the duel isn't perfect, and I think it's because they thought it had to be perfect more than anything else. Like they thought they had to nail it or whatever, and they put this pressure on themselves, and they ended up making some choices that maybe probably weren't the best. But it does get the job done at the end of the day. I mean, ultimately, you still tell the story, and we get Vader cut down.
But I also think in nature is because we started the movie with a lightsaber duel. We had baked the lightsaber duel in the middle. Now we have two now next to one another going on. So it's almost like you got too much cake at one time.
And even like a lot of this doesn't even bother me until Anakin's on top of the one droid. Now he's on the droid, and now it's sort of weird and silly. But prior to this, some of the theatrics, they're swinging the sabers way too fast. You can't follow the action super well, but it's also like unrealistic to see people like swinging sticks around that quickly. Um, there's that famous GIF of the two of them like s- twirling their lightsabers next to each other, like trying not to hit each other. Um, there's a lot of feelings here, um, but yeah, again, at the end of the day, it's like, oh, we're sort of quibbling because it's like
Well,
we had built it up.
so and
We did want this thing to deliver.
we finally just got a little bit of dialogue between Obi-Wan and Anakin. That's what this duel needed, was
Mm-hmm.
more dialogue,
Mm.
you know. Um, but except for like this coming up is like just an example of why George Lucas is not a good director of actors. He's a good director of action and and a good storyteller and everything. But this, who could look at this line from Hayden Christensen saying, "You underestimate my power," and like know that that's the best take? Ugh. Sorry.
It never bothered me.
Oh, it's always bothered me from the moment he uttered it. And what do you call a guy with no arms and no legs laying on the ground? Matt. You call a guy with no arms and no legs, no thing of leaves. Oh, sorry. Darth Matt.
I do love the little bit of trivia here, which is that they had not shot Obi-Wan picking up Anakin's saber to eventually hand on to Luke. They had totally forgotten to do that, and they had to shoot that later on.
I did not know that. I did not know that.
It makes sense. I mean, he wouldn't have thought to necessarily pick it up, but then we know that he did, and so we need to see that. Again, at this point, we're just connecting dots between this point and episode 4.
And what I'm waiting for, okay, so this is what I can't wait for in the Obi-Wan series, because at some point, because Obi-Wan doesn't know that Anakin is in the suit, and that for all intents and purposes he thinks that Darth Vader is dead, but at some point he's going to hear about Darth Vader, and that's going to ring his bell going, oh crap, Anakin's still alive. And then that sets up probably their duel in, the Obi-Wan series. That's going to be
do you think we will see that on screen? Because he may have realized it prior to the point of seeing it in Obi-Wan.
Well, I think what's going to happen is an Inquisitor is going to find him, and they're going to mention Lord Vader, and he's going to be like, what did you just say? And so I think that, I mean, that's my thought on the whole thing.
Yeah, because thinking about it, part of me has always wondered, ever since we heard that we're getting the Obi-Wan series and Hayden was going to come back, looking back at episode 4, that moment when Obi-Wan comes up to Vader standing there in the hallway, it's like he knew who that was, clearly, because he told the lie to Luke about his pupil, his dad being killed by Darth Vader. So he knows who it is. But it's also a question of, had he seen him before that point?
Well, he says he's
Part
more
of me,
machine now than man, so
he knows what he looks like. So that moment in episode 4 shouldn't come as a surprise. And if we're going to get a duel between them, it won't come as a surprise because
Right.
he'll have seen him beforehand.
The other thing about that I'm thinking about right now is does Palpatine utter the name Vader during that security
he does
footage?
He does. So, but like I said, so Obi-Wan knows
The name Vader
and knows that Anakin's going by Darth Vader, but for all he knows right now, Anakin's burning on Mustafar and dead.
Yeah, and
he's gonna be out on Tatooine, probably away from all the news and everything, and eventually, it's not like everybody's gonna hear about Darth Vader. But that's why I think an Inquisitor is going to drop the name, and he's going to go, oh crud, he's still alive.
It's possible.
Yeah, at some point, you imagine that he will know that Anakin survived, that Vader's still out there, that he's still being hunted by him. So that's all going to be an interesting uh, moment in the series because I wonder how much of Padme's death he's gonna, Anakin's gonna throw at Obi-Wan, and likewise,
This
So
scene
because none of
right
that comes
here.
up in Episode 4.
Sorry, this scene right here. Oh, I wish they would have left it. If you read in the novelization, and of course you got the deleted scene. Yoda is speaking with Qui-Gon, and why didn't they leave that in?
uh, right before that, we got to see Palpatine kneel beside
With
Anakin.
a sign of compassion.
Like, it didn't feel wrong, though. Like, even on first viewing and in subsequent viewings, it doesn't feel like out of character or wrong. And I've never wrapped my brain around quite why. Maybe he's just an acknowledgement that he's not completely awful. Um, Obviously, he's invested in this man and trying to make him the best Sith he can make him so that, he has a worthy apprentice and all that. Um, but, it's such a weird little detail. And it always strikes me every time I see it. And it never feels out of place, but it does just add this little layer of complexity that we wouldn't have had otherwise.
Now, of
Yeah,
course, if I want to go into my own head canon and try to make sense of this, perhaps
Okay.
the Force is taking all of Padme's life force and putting it into Luke and Leia. Yeah, to
Yeah,
the most powerful,
there
to the
always
most powerful Jedi. Maybe that
chill.
was just part of the deal. That you know.
Well, and maybe all they needed to say is that between her injuries and her trauma and all and the fact that she's delivering children into the world, which is one of the most traumatic and difficult and dangerous moments any woman can go through. They didn't need much to explain why she would die in childbirth. Of course, that goes against what we heard in Return of the Jedi.
And that's the thing.
So,
I wish they would have left
Yeah.
her, let her live, and she went to live on Alderaan. And it
kind of like
turns
a
out
myth.
that Anakin ends up being a part of, what ends up killing her anyway and blowing up Alderaan. But
You take away that one line, she has lost the will to live. Take that stupid, goofy line delivered by that stupid, goofy robot character.
and then it all works, right?
And it works so much better because, again, it's open to interpretation.
Well,
You can,
and
you
and
can even
women
say,
die in childbirth. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, that's a thing.
that's a thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, she
You
lost
you
the
could
will to
also
live.
interpret it as her transferring some of her life force into Anakin to save him.
True,
Uh,
which I
you
think is
know.
what Leia did for Ben.
Kylo, right?
Mm-hmm.
By the
But
way,
again,
the
But also,
subtitles there just said "soft thud." Anyway, I like the
but
moment the
part of me
mask
was
gets put on is awesome. Anyway, go ahead, Fredo.
no, I was going to say, and part of me thought if you wanted, because you've established that when she was young, when she was the queen, that she had a number of look-alike agents that were their handmaidens. So she could have assumed, if you wanted her to still live and long enough for her to kind of be looking in the background on Leia and Alderaan before she passes away, you could have said she pretended to die and then she assumed the identity of one of her handmaidens and she went to work for, Bail Organa and his wife. But of course, part of the problem here is if Padme's alive, no way would she have given up Luke. And you need to separate the twins.
Now I
yeah.
want to go on record here. I do not mind the Frankenstein homage until
No.
until that. That is I don't mind him breaking free of his bonds and then destroying the whole room, but him going no is just like ugh.
Yeah.
And again,
And again,
it's little things like that that makes me, the movie is good, but it's those little things. It's just a punch to the gut where it's just kind of like,
Yeah. You're sitting here, you're really enjoying it, you're really liking what you're seeing, and then like a moment,
it's
and
it's
you're
like it's like
ah.
you're really enjoying this comedian. And then he tells a really racist joke, and you just go, oh. It's like, oh, come on. Like I said, I don't mind any of it until he says, no. But anyway,
I'm thankful for no that it exists because we can all laugh at no. Um, the
it's
no
one.
that kills me is when they transpose that into Return of the Jedi.
yes,
Like that,
that makes me
Oh
even
God,
more mad. Yes,
I can't deal with that. Like that just.
no, no.
yes.
That thing, again, the music is doing all the hard work. You don't need to do nothing.
And again, that's the thing is that makes me wonder. Is every good leader, every good, there has to be somebody. There has to be, Paul McCartney had to have John Lennon to say, yeah, no, that's not good. They had to have that relationship to be able to say, no, that's really bad. Let's make it better this way. You have to have somebody in the room that is, confident enough to say, no, George, don't put no, don't. We don't want to do that because it'll sound dumb. And
Or at least,
George Lucas has to have, the, I suppose the skin thick enough to be able to, and the humility enough to have somebody in the room that is that sounding board.
well,
But I
okay,
don't, and
bit
so
of
I
trivia.
don't know if there's anybody in the room for him.
No, not at this point. By the way, what was the last line ever uttered in a Star Wars movie until The Force Awakens came out?
I don't know.
3PO going, "Oh no!" When Bail Organa says, "Well, we erase his mind, wipe him."
There you go. And
But
here we
yeah, that was
go. Yep, it's coming up,
We
and
have to give you the
we.
Captain Antilles. That's right.
so. I guess that means that R2 and 3PO and Captain Antilles just stayed on Bail Organa's chauffeur ship for the next 18 years.
I think
Must.
they got to get off the ship once in a while. We saw that in Rogue One.
That's true. That's true. But it does explain why they're there. In Yavin 4 before they come back.
We don't really understand that we just saw Padme's parents because that whole scene was cut from episode 2.
Yeah,
It's a little
yeah.
Hmm.
confusing. Um, However, I do like that the Gungans are there, and I like the Japor snippet here.
Hmm.
That's a very poignant moment. And I like the very Empire Strikes Back-ish look here. And
Hmm.
was it clear to you that this was Grand Moff Tarkin or Admiral Tarkin anyway?
Yeah.
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 The CGI with his face as well as his pause, the way he's standing, is just screaming Tarkin.
Yeah. Silhouette.
And so then we whisk away to Alderaan, showing that Leia is going to be living there.
Looking for Leia in Alderaan places. Well, this was our first glimpse at Alderaan. I remember in the theaters, everyone's like, "Ooh, look, it's Alderaan."
I like how she's just sitting there waiting, and all of a sudden, like, here's a baby. But
Yeah,
He
he's looking
wasn't
like
called
he's
her.
trying to get credit for it. Look, I got us a baby.
don't you think the conversation would be where did this come from? Where did you get this? Um, and I like the ending here with Owen and Beru. It'll be interesting also to see where the falling out between Obi-Wan and Owen takes place
Hmm.
because he doesn't think highly of Obi-Wan in Episode 4. And here it seems like, okay, yeah, we'll help you out, no problem. You know,
Well,
uh,
you gotta imagine that once Owen sees the Inquisitors and the way they're still hunting Jedi, and the idea of threatening the kid that he's raised as his own for close to a decade happens, that he might be less willing to let said kid go off with old crazy Ben to go fix the galaxy.
And again, it's like, here you go, have a kid. Um, but yeah, the twin sunsets, so it's a really fitting way for them to have ended it.
I mean, it was a good epilogue. It was a good
Mhm.
epilogue for this. Yeah. I think Fredo,
Obi-Wan's
your
given us a
point,
story.
your point of um, the fact that there were so many dots to connect, um, made for some herky jerky, writing and moments. We saw that in the sequel trilogy as well. So yeah, that's. But like I said, it's I and please, I don't dislike the movie, but like I said, there are just so many of those moments that make me go ugh, that I just tend not to really fire that one
And
up on on Disney Plus when I'm bored. Um,
I also think because of the nature of the story and because of how much episode one, particularly, but also episode one, episode two, George got to let his imagination run wild, do what he needed, because he only needed to hit one or two big points, really. This is the movie where everything has to come together in order to give us the world or the galaxy as we know it when episode four happens. So that leaves him less time to play around. So whenever he does, stuff sticks out a bit more because whether it's the lizard on Utapau or the soft moments between Anakin and Padme, if they don't hit right, they stick out because there's so much other stuff that they need to fill in.
well, it gives credence to the people who argue that leave out episode one and start with episode two
Mhm.
and take the stuff from episode two and maybe a little bit from the Clone Wars in episode three, and you have, you know, it would probably make for a more cohesive story. But oh well.
And really, the biggest dynamic, I think, is because we got to see, I mean, there was no romance in episode one. There couldn't be. Let's put it that way. So that meant that all the heavy lifting for the Doom star-crossed romance between Anakin Skywalker and Padme Amidala had to be set in episode two, which you can't do in one movie. It has been, that's not impossible to do. Empire Strikes Back did it with Han and Leia,
Yeah.
but because you're building so much of Anakin's fall into this tapestry of that romance, it either connects or it fails. And if it didn't connect with you, you don't buy his fall.
Yeah. I mean, like so much of this boils down to choices, and the choices that George made in the first movie dictated what he had to do in the second movie, and then that dictated what he had to do in the third. And um, this is ultimately a story that a lot of people um, maybe didn't envision or think that that we should have gotten, but um, it is what we got. Um,
And
and I really appreciate the ambition of it all because, again, like George is trying to tell this story in a unique visual manner that like hadn't been really done before. Like the way that they leaned on green screen and all the effects and everything else. Again, maybe too ambitious, but
Mhm.
I'd rather see some. I always use this analogy. I'd rather see a hitter like Sammy Sosa come up to the plate than some guy who's just trying to get on base. Because like yeah, he's going to strike out a whole bunch of times, but he's also going to hit that 500 footer. And like that's how I look at the prequels. There's a bunch of strikeouts, but there's also a bunch of 500 footers and um
we'll never know. Um, but it is so. It seems like and I know it's problematic to bring up this author's name, but it would have been would have to take the people who made the prequels and the people who made the sequels, um, if they would have been more along the lines of what J.K. Rowling did with the Harry Potter series, where it was everything was mapped out, and then she wrote the story. Whereas it seemed like we went through the prequels and the sequels movie to movie. It's like, I need to do this thing in this movie. Then it's like, okay, so now what happens? You had a general idea of what was going on, but she had everything. And so when you read those books, it's like something you read in book 6 harkens back to, it's like that's why they mentioned it in book 2. It was like they laid it there for you, and while it was a throwaway thing in book 2, all of a sudden it is like the most important thing in the world. So
Mhm.
if and that's what I hope going forward. If we're going to be creating Star Wars trilogies, it's like write the whole story, and then get the director or directors to make that movie series.
Yeah, because
You could make the argument this is the most cohesive of the Star Wars trilogies, the prequels.
Yeah,
Because it was sort of mapped out in a way. Like he knew he had to get from point A to point B. It's just like the in between those 2 points was kind of like haphazard at times.
I was just thinking, actually, when you're talking about literary journeys, I was thinking of George R. R. Martin and A Song of Ice and Fire, because he's still a decade later still writing book 6. And you're like, why would he not just put it out? And it's because he's one of those authors who has the big kind of beats kind of mapped out, but then he goes off on these tangents and he explores over here and does over there. And literature is different than film. He can do that in
yeah,
literature, and as long as there's enough binding glue to hold all the pages together, you're good. A movie, there's a limit to how much movie you can put on on a screen.
fair enough.
But I think,
No, I said fair
but
enough.
yeah, but
Yeah,
yeah, but I do think, to your point, you're right. It's better if if you know where you're supposed to go. That way, you don't get lost in the weeds when you have to switch jockeys mid race. I guess
so
when you have to
if
lose Colin Trevorrow for J.J.
so
Abrams.
that's why I'm saying, if they're not going to do that, it's like hire Dave Gladow to write a trilogy, and then hire 3 directors to make that movie. You know, if you're not going to do that, then just have 3 standalone Star Wars movies, and just let Dave write his, and Fredo write his, and me write mine. Anyway, because it just didn't really work in the sequels the way I think they hoped it to. Well, we have kept everybody for 2.5 hours, and 5 a.m. is going to come really early. So, any final thoughts for everybody, Dave or Fredo?
I just think the zeitgeist of this movie matters when evaluating it a lot. He's like, this was the last Star Wars movie at the time. Like that was such a big deal. And I know that when Phantom Menace came along, everyone was like, I never thought we'd get the prequels. It's like, well, we were getting them. And then once 6 came around, or when 3 came around, it was like, well, this is it. This is the end of it. And we didn't think we were getting any more after that. And so for me, I will always look back at this movie as just being like, it hit me at the right time in my life for me to just fully appreciate it. Um, and I'll always love this movie.
Yeah, just finally, I'm just thinking, I always recognize that the prequel trilogy was made for that new generation of Star Wars fan, more as much as it was made for the original trilogy fans, because you see all just look at the way that people reacted to the Obi-Wan trailer and all the music there, whether it was Duel of Fates, Battle of the Heroes, or all the reactions that you see whenever they show you a new version of Order 66. This movie, whatever its flaws, it had such emotional moments that for many within the fan base, it's quintessential. They cannot separate being a Star Wars fan from Episode 3, from Order 66, from General Grievous, from everything that this movie brought to them.
Well, cool. All right. Well, thanks for watching Revenge of the Sith with us, guys. And so with that, we will say who dat,
True that.
So that
and everybody have an awesome week.
McClunky.